Question for short debate. Freedom of contemporary cultural boycotts. May I remind noble lords that the time limit is strictly 1 hour. Baroness Fox of Buckley.
My lords, I'm delighted to have the chance to bring the Government and House's attention to the themes in this recent report, the new boycott crisis. If we value art as a crucial mirror on society, the corruption of art reflects social trends right back at us, and we should look back closely. So many thanks to those noble lords who are doing that today. The report was launched here in Westminster at the end of April, alongside the Art Beyond Boycott Toolkit. It was a packed room and lots of cross-party attendance. The authors are co-founders of Freedom in the Arts, Rosie Kay, an award-winning choreographer, and Denise Fahmy, a senior arts professional, who teamed up with Reading University's Professor Joe Phoenix. All three have experienced the vicious consequence of cancel culture. They combine their personal insights with oodles of professional knowledge to provide a multi-layered investigation into how boycotts operate against different art forms, and not just looking at individual artists, but at gatekeepers such as venues, agents, managers and producers. Using survey data and qualitative interviews, the report shows how even the threat of cultural boycotts are leading to anticipatory cancellation, institutional anxiety, silent boycotts and self-censorship. The report is so on the money, it got extensive media coverage even in the same crowded week of the local elections. And significantly, it was picked up by specialist publications such as Arts Professional, the Museum's Journal, Chortle, Mixmag, no doubt because it cut through due to its insights into the genuinely heartbreaking stories of individual artists brought to financial and reputational personal ruin by boycotts. And you can't get more personal than being cancelled because of your identity. As the report documents, that's the fate of so many Jewish artists today. Perhaps this is nothing new. As we head into August and Edinburgh Festival season, I recall years of participating in that wonderful, artistically rich atmosphere when the Academy of Ideas put on arts debates and live reviewing at Fringe and the Buchan International Festivals. It was a joy. But it started to turn sour when 20 years ago, the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign demanded boycotts of any art form involving Israelis. Whether it was an ugly disruption of a performance of the Jerusalem Quartet in 2008, with activists yelling Israeli armed musicians, or a decade later getting an Israeli hip-hop opera evicted from its venue. These were shocking, but marginal, isolated incidents. What's shocking today, such occurrences are so regular they're barely noticed. The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism notes, quote, discrimination against Jewish people is so normalised in the arts, it's now simply part of doing business as a Jewish creative in modern Britain. But the report notes something else, something that's changed. If boycotts were historically public, involving external bodies bullying arts organisations, today they've evolved into internal, systemic, dynamic within arts organisations. Sometimes it's a leadership team more driven by ideological agendas than artistic excellence, but more often it's insidious, with weak management capitulating to staff complaints, demanding that their well-being is protected from allegedly dangerous performers. Last year, Comics Philip Simon's show Duorama and Rachel Krieger's Ultimate Jewish Mother had their acts pulled at the last minute by a fringe venue, and the reason? Staff at the venue complained of feeling unsafe. Apparently, a fictional comedic Jewish mother was a threat to employee safety. The report is full of similar evidence of employees activating internal HR procedures to reframe political demands. And there's an additional institutional vehicle used similarly, especially in publicly funded arts organisations, and that is values frameworks and equality, diversity and inclusion policies. I know that the government can be a little defensive about the virtues of EDI, but I do hope the Minister will examine the documentation of how EDI is being weaponised to demand boycotting certain artists. I note that in February, DCMS Minister Ian Murray MP, while stating the government's commitment to free speech, caveated it. He quoted the Secretary of State's ambition not to stoke the culture wars and stressed the need to protect people from hate speech. But does the noble lady, the Minister, acknowledge that in many institutions, the culture wars are stoked by EDI enthusiasts and that hate speech is often a euphemism for speech someone disagrees with? Arts organisations often state their value statements are anti-hate to justify cancelling Zionist and gender-critical artists, for example. In her moving and passionate speech at the report launch, acclaimed singer-songwriter Roisin Murphy, herself a victim of a high-profile, vicious boycott after speaking her mind on puberty blockers, made an important, relevant point. She said that public funding, meant to support excellence regardless of politics, has become a, quote, ideological point scheme. She said, this isn't patronage, it's patronage with strings attached so tight they strangle the critical thinking it takes to invent anything. So what can politicians and government do to help arts escape this censorious stranglehold? While the Arts Council declined an invitation to attend the parliamentary launch of the report, it was notable that a couple of days later, after 2 Jewish men were murdered in Golders Green, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer used the opportunity to put pressure on the Arts Council. He said, where public funding is being used to promote or platform anti-Semitism, the Arts Council must act, using its power to suspend, withdraw or claw back funding. That's a positive sentiment, but I worry about cancelling the cancellers as a tactic, and it does miss perhaps more subtle, silent boycotts rather than the overt anti-Jewish abuse. And also, it doesn't note a wider range of artists with dissenting views are now targeted. An example, Scottish performance poet Jenny Lindsay, author of the aptly titled book Hounded, explains that after a tweet criticising a trans activist threatening violence against lesbians, she had 7 months of private, quiet, bewildering cancellation, losing work without knowing why, unanswered emails, complaints to her publishers, messages saying we're frightened to book you. She notes it was clear people had got a memo, Jenny Lindsay's a TERF. But with no paper trails, no proof, just commissions swerved in case they cause grief, it can be especially isolating. And the real loss is, quote, artwork that was never made and never seen. I therefore hope the Minister will meet the authors of this to discuss how the government can help the sector adopt the report's proposals to improve institutional capacity to resist this politicisation of programming and employment decisions that is discriminatory in terms of who gets to create, perform, exhibit, publish. Artistic judgments must be centre stage. Leadership from ministers could include public support for boycotted artists, encouraging publicly funded arts organisations, indeed the Arts Council, to adopt the Freedom in the Arts Free Speech Charter. And to conclude, artistic creation needs freedom to challenge, explore, surprise, push boundaries. Otherwise, art created and programmed will be risk-averse, narrower, safer, samey, carefully calculated and curated not to offend. What a dreary tragedy. To quote Roisin Murphy again, without that freedom, we won't get better art. We simply put artists into a chokehold and suffocate the life out of our culture. The arts must breathe freely again. How can the Minister help them breathe freely again?